And good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. I'm Jason Grisgork, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you the opportunity to talk to Representative Deaver of the 20th District.
It's always good to see you.
Good seeing you. I'm glad you're back, and welcome to what I guess is the start of fall, as a matter of fact, today.
You know, as the trees are losing their leaves, I think I've lost more hair since I saw you last
I know. I was going to say, you're looking a little different today.
You know, it's the curse of age, I guess.
How has the summer been treating you, considering you did have a little bit of time off from the house? And
summer's been good. I spent, I've been pretty much on the campaign or constituent trail nonstop for about 5 years. So, albeit I still kept in touch with the office, I decided to spend some time with the family. A long promised updates to the house and vacations and those types of things. So I wanted to spend some time with the boys, and they're going to be 8 and 10 this fall. So they're at that age where
you better get every moment that you can.
Absolutely, and they're, Dad, we want to go fishing. Dad, we want to do this. We want to do that. So did have a good day at Kings Island, where, believe it or not, even the youngest kid got on the Beast and the Vortex, and so I'm a happy camper.
Hey,
I love
you've
roller
made the day.
coasters. So I've got 2 boys that like roller coasters, so I'm happy with that.
I had the same luck this year as well. I have a young niece who is ready to just try to go out and do those things, and she's this shy. And she's like, if I go on my toes, I said, they're not going to like you to do that.
So you should, instead of the flip-flops, put the tennis shoes on, and then that should have been good to go.
Next year, she's ready to go.
Wonderful.
And speaking of ready to go, we've obviously gone back into session.
We have.
And obviously have a lot to talk about. As we were walking in, kind of kidding to one another, but it's truthful, it's been a long time since we've been together since. And obviously you've been taking care of the fair state and well, not you on yourself. I mean, if you're carrying that whole on your shoulder, I applaud you. But.
Well, sometimes I feel that way.
Well, with the things that we're going to talk about, which are going to be some heavy issues today, obviously there are going to be some moments of somber. Let's start out going right in with House Bill 132,
sure.
Which is something that you've been working on. It's not as dire as what we're going to be talking about, but obviously something that people get caught up into, which is fantasy football. A lot of people don't think that it's anything but something fun to play, but if you've watched news reports and you've seen things, people can get into a very deep hole when it comes to something as what may look as a game to some, but as like a livelihood to others.
That's a good question. So here's what's really interesting about this. I didn't really understand the numbers behind this, how many people are participating in some sort of a fantasy sport activity. So in Ohio, at any given moment, in any given year, believe it or not, we have about 1.9 million Ohioans out of 11.5 that participate at some level in fantasy sports, whether it's seasonal, once, twice, 3 times, weekly, whatever.
It's scary to think. It's a tenth of the population.
It is a big segment of the population, and this is also something that's not technically gambling. So it is not covered by our gambling statutes. The Casino Control Commission does not oversee the industries or the portals. So for those that don't do fantasy sports, this is really something guys kind of did in their backyard. Somebody had a pad of paper, and they were monitoring it.
This is beyond that infamous office pool, March Madness, anything else.
This is bigger now. So instead of playing with 3 or 4 people, you can put yourself into a website where you're playing with a couple hundred people, thousands of people on a weekly basis. So the purpose of the bill is, quite frankly, to put some rules on this and to put some consumer protections in place. So that's really what we're trying to do. So far, we've gotten it out of House. We're in our 3rd hearing now in the Senate, and we're expecting the bill to move this fall. So we're hopeful that the bill will move. And inside of that, we're going to have some consumer protections, very, very important. Remember, you're going onto a website and you're putting your money in there, and you're using that platform. So we want to have some rules for the people who provide the service, which is the website itself. Most of these platforms don't take a rake, so it's not like a casino where you go down there and you know the casino's going to win.
And take a little bit of the chunk from you.
Correct. I mean, you're paying for that privilege of having the website, so it would be like any other website that you use to have the service. But the issue is you're putting money in there, and they're holding it for you. And from our perspective as a state, we want to make sure that money's protected and there's some protections for you as a player.
Oh, you're looking at something that's not a bank, that's not being held by the FDIC or anything to that statute.
And they're standing in a fiduciary capacity. So the industry, believe it or not, are the ones that came to us and said, look, we want to have some protections here. We want to make sure that as this industry expands and as more and more people are providing platforms, I mean, right now the big ones that you see are FanDuel, DraftKings.
Right.
But there's lots of other smaller people that have built a website, built a platform, so that they also can compete in the space, and they're not as national, they're more regional. So the idea is to put some rules that are fair for the bigger operators, but the smaller operators,
And
but also provide those consumer protections for the players.
And obviously, it's going to probably overlap onto things that are not necessarily considered sports. I mean, we're calling it fantasy football or fantasy leagues or things like that. But there are also going to probably pop up not just sports. Could be a Dungeons and Dragons type of thing, or
Sure.
Sure.
Why not?
But why not?
I don't know.
I don't play either, but
And the funny thing is I'm not really a player of fantasy sports. I have a lot of friends that are.
Sure.
I'm more of a consumer protection kind of guy, as you know.
Yes.
So they came to me because they wanted someone who understood the consumer protection components. I mean, as a lawyer, I do most of my work in that area. And my co-sponsor, my joint sponsor, he actually plays. So between the two of us, we're both lawyers as well. We've been able to navigate the realities of how the game works, how the websites work, but I also have a technology background, so I know how to do the BA side of technology.
Right.
So between the two of us, we've come together and created a pretty good team and have a solid bill.
For something like this, obviously, again, you're dealing with constituents who are kind of not buried in it, but at least are a part of it, and you're coming in blind, so to speak. What are what is the uniqueness that's going into this? What's the draw? Why are people there? And it is a draw because I've seen people, I'm going to only do it once. I'm just going to root for who I think it is. And then 2 years later, they're like, you know what I'm doing? So.
The way I look at it is everybody has their own hobby. So for myself, I'm not a gambler. If I go to a conference somewhere and there happens to be a casino, I have a $20 max that I'm willing to risk, and I'm done. And if it takes me one draw, one hand and I'm done, or I can sit there all night, I'm done. It doesn't matter, $20. But I also have a rule that if I get to 30, I'm out. So because at least I can buy a cup of coffee. So that's just me. I have my own hobbies, and everybody has their own thing that they do, regardless of what it is. My concern, obviously, as a legislator, is providing those consumer protections and making sure that the people that are engaging in the hobby, since it's moving from your living room and your family room and the cell phone and the back rooms with your buddies, getting together once a week and comparing notes, to a platform where a third party now is going to be responsible holding your money and verifying the statistics and what occurred. In my view, it's not their money, it's your money, or it's the player's money. I want to make sure that in the least restrictive means possible, that we have some sort of rules that are established that gives the Casino Control Commission some guidelines on how to make sure that the operators of the websites are doing it in a way that's open and transparent, accountable, and that we have some rules on the handling of funds and it's done correctly. The nice part is most of the operators on the fund side are right here in our own backyard. Vaniv right here.
Okay.
And so they do most of the back end piece, which gives me a very good sleep at night because they're a very good business. And they are experts in securing portals and transactions and doing monetary transactions. So they're actually at the table too with us, working through the legislation, because they do a lot of that type of work. And right here in our own backyard, again, we've got experts that can help us draft a policy that makes sense for folks.
And I like the fact that we're looking out for Ohioans, but obviously this is going to go one step further, because once these pieces of legislation are enacted and in place, you're now helping somebody out in Wyoming, Minnesota.
Absolutely.
Because now, not only do they have to conform to what we're asking as a standard, it kind of has to morph on their own as well.
Well, and the other hope too is that because the way we're drafting the legislation, encourage those businesses to relocate here. And
Fair.
So we'll have those individuals and those businesses here with those high-paying jobs. Because remember, these are all tech guys.
Yes.
Right, so these are all jobs that are going to be paying several $100s an hour, a couple $100,000 a year. So we're going to be bringing more opportunities for employment here to Ohio, keeping more of our own kids out of Cincinnati's computer science program, Ohio State, et cetera.
No,
some of the graphic artists out of DAP. I mean, we want those kids staying here. So why not create an environment where our legislation is really business friendly, put some reasonable rules, but makes the regulatory frameworks so ideal that they're going to be hiring people here in Ohio and staying here. So that's part of the issue too.
Sure. As you said, we are gathering those backers that are looking at this and saying, yeah, this makes sense. Without that pushback, do you not see this going forward to finally making this law in Ohio?
My best guess is that before the end of October or first part of November, this will pass the Senate.
Excellent.
I'm very confident that will happen. The Senate is very supportive of the effort. I think both members of the House and Senate are happy to see the industry coming forward with this and saying, look, we acknowledge that there's a problem. We acknowledge that we're existing in a gray area. The Attorney General says so. And their view is because the Attorney General is saying that the legislature needs to deal with this because in his view it's not gambling, it doesn't mean that a future Attorney General may have a different perspective, which means then all the 1.9 million folks that are doing this in Ohio, tomorrow, just like that, they could be out the opportunity to engage in their hobby on a weekend. So that is very possible. You never know who the next Attorney General is going to be.
Right.
You never know what issues they're going to take up. This might be one of them. They may have a different interpretation of our constitutional amendment and the statutes that have come out since. So it's better to deal with this head on. And I'm very pleased that the industry has done that. Whether we've had everybody, the big guys, the small guys, the players, everybody in the work group, and we've had no opposition to the language so far. Senator Coley in the Senate, who I would say is probably the most experienced and knowledgeable person when it comes to gaming law, has a couple of amendments he'd like to make to take care of some of the things like pools that you might see at restaurants where they have little pools and things like that.
Yeah, okay.
So he's got some ideas on how we can include that as part of this process. So we're open to that, but I'm assuming we'll see some language from him and a bill ready to pass here in about a month.
That's great. Now, of course, you being, as you said, the watchdog, you're looking out for everybody here. Why was it Ohio? Why were you lucky enough to step up? Why wasn't it California, New York, somebody like that?
Well, many states have. So
Okay.
there are other states that are working on
It
this.
just
Some
seems
have
like
already
we're being more
passed.
proactive.
Well, we're at least at the front of it. So
Sure.
normally I always laugh. We have this philosophy in the legislature, which I'm working on changing every day. Well, what have all the other 49 states done? Let's figure out what they're going to do, and then we'll do something. And I'm more of a person to think that why not be first?
Sure.
We should be first, and many of the pieces of legislation I've done are the first in the country, and that's my approach. We've come from an innovative part of the state, so let's be innovators in public policy, not just in machine tools and mechanics and
No.
technology and automobile sector and aviation. Let's be first in our public policy space too.
Excellent. So as you said, hopefully October, November, we'll see people's
sir.
hobbies change just a little bit, but only for the safety of it.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of safety, as I said, it's going to be a little dire day today, but something that's been going on, House Bill 56, which is actually in helping, but the discussion point here is very dire. It deals with human trafficking.
Yes, sir.
It is something that most people probably don't think is going on, and it is. You don't realize how close many people are to it, and it is a very frightening thing. Now, something like House Bill 56, which is allowing the expungement of records of individuals who were, dare I say, trapped in this terror, is going forward. Why would you step up for something like this? I mean, obviously, somebody needs to be the voice, and this is a great way to start helping these people rebuild their lives.
Well, I think the main reason, and you probably remember this the first time we met,
Yes.
you asked me why I was running. And I said, well, quite frankly, from my perspective, I was tired of legislators doing things for, and government doing things for people who could take care of their own and could take care of themselves. I view the government, and my role is to provide an equal playing field, but also provide help for those who can't help themselves, right? That's why I did the ABLE Act, to help give people with disabilities a chance to save for their future. There's no reason why we should be treating somebody with a disability as though they're a third-rate citizen. They're no different than you and I, and their limitations are, in a lot of ways, superior to our limitations as human beings.
It's very true.
So when we pick on people and we attack them for circumstances where they are not in control of that particular aspect of their life, I don't think we're doing any service to the citizenry at large, and we're definitively not helping people who need a help up. I'm not saying that we should support somebody indefinitely and give them a free pass, but
No.
I'm always a believer that you give someone the tools, you help them out when they're in need, when they're down on their luck, you help them out, get them back up so that they can have a future. One of the problems with human trafficking is it typically affects the poorest folks in our community. It doesn't matter what you look like anymore. It doesn't matter whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Latin America. It doesn't matter whether English is your first language, whether you came from another country. It doesn't matter whether you came from Indian Hill, Hyde Park, Forest Park, Springdale, or any of the other communities I represent. It's here. And it's little boys, it's little girls, and they're trafficked. And they are often drugged with heroin. They are kept in an environment where they are threatened with their physical life every single day, and they are stuck. and they don't know how to get out. And a lot of times they're so scared that even when they get arrested the very first time for soliciting, they don't want to get out even though there's an opportunity to get out and that officer's trying to help them. And the reality of it is that when they're chemically addicted and psychologically abused and physically abused, and they start them when they're young,
Oh, yes.
and they
Yes.
catch them when they're teenagers, they're runaways, or they catch them off of Craigslist, they catch them somehow they can, however they can, abduct them, throw them in there, however they get started in this. They really do become victims of the environment. And what this bill is trying to do is help those that have helped themselves and gotten out. Now imagine, if you would, that if you fell into this environment and you fell into this culture and you're a kid, 13, 14-year-old kid, you don't know any different and you're scared to death, you don't know where your parents are, and this person's moving you around the country every single week to a new city, putting you on Backpage, putting you on Craigslist, and exploiting you. And the only thing you're getting is some heroin to get you through the moment and a little bit of food here or there from a McDonald's.
And
you're
if you're,
thrown
if
in
you're lucky.
If you're lucky, and you're living day to day, week to week, hour to hour, and you have no idea what's going to happen to you in the next 15 minutes. And you don't know if the person that's coming into that room is going to kill you or abuse you or what's going to happen.
And the person doing it, being the person trafficking you, could care less.
That's right. You are just a cog, and as long as you're producing money, you're theoretically safe for the moment.
Yes.
Now, the tragedy with this, though, is that when you do get an opportunity to escape and you do get out, all of those things that happen to you, where you get picked up and you get a charge for solicitation, maybe get picked up on a drug charge, a drunken disorderly, whatever those charges are, if it weren't for the trafficking, never would have happened.
It's true.
And so how are you supposed to get out? We had a wonderful lady who came in and testified. She said, thank you for bringing this to bringing this forward. And this bill was last General Assembly. We worked really hard to get this done in my first term, and we fell short in the last few weeks. We were right down to the very last day before we broke, and we were still fighting over language, believe it or not, and it fell apart right there at the last day. So it was my commitment and Senator Coonsey's commitment, who was in the House with me last term, to reintroduce it and get this thing done this term. And so we're really close at this point. We're still arguing over the scope of it, and that's fine, and it's good legitimate discussions. But the reality of it is as this lady testified, look, I got out and I got clean, I went to college, got an education, but I can't get a job because I've got a criminal record and I can't get a job. I've done everything I need to do, and I'm still waiting tables, and then when they find out what I did, I lose those jobs.
And the unfortunate thing is it's not her fault.
No. And how do you move on with your life? If you've paid your debt to society, if you've done everything the judge has asked you to do and the prosecutor's asked you to do, and you're clean and sober, you've got an education, and it was 15 years ago, and you're out, how can you have a future when everybody looks at you as though you're still a streetwalker or you're still a person with low moral character? Because believe it or not, people do. Even though they know you're a victim, they won't hire you because you have that record.
Correct.
And so what this bill is attempting to do is give them an opportunity to plead before a judge, plead before the prosecutor, to have these records expunged and say, look, I was arrested, I wasn't convicted. Which, quite frankly, I think should be the case for every American and every Ohioan. If you're arrested and not convicted, that should be deleted. It shouldn't say, I got arrested. Well,
okay.
There's 5 John Smiths, and you arrested the wrong one and let me go. Why do I have an arrest record now?
Right. Why does this stay with me?
Correct.
Just because my name happens to be.
It's the same, that actually does happen. Same names, you have an arrest record, even though they got the wrong guy, let you go, got the right guy. Now you have an arrest record, you did nothing wrong. And so even that by itself is unbelievable that we allow that in Ohio.
That is crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
And so part of the argument really that's going on is, well, why aren't we doing that too at the same time, even though this is really narrow in scope? And my philosophy is, let's deal with what's in front of us, and then we can expand this to help others.
Sure.
So really what we're dealing with here is not only arrest records, but you're not convicted, like those records should go away. If you're detained, those records should go away. But even if you are convicted, there should be a process to plead a case and says, look, if it were not for the duress that I was under as a trafficked individual, I wouldn't have done this.
Does that not fall, so to speak, I mean, you're the lawyer here. Does this not fall under things like for a mental case, for mental cases in that regards? Because, as you said, if it were not for the situations put at hand, that would not have been the path they chose. I don't think somebody wakes up in the morning and goes, today's my day to...
And I think by and large that's accurate, but I think here's the reality of it, is that when you're sitting in a courtroom and the pimp's sitting in the back and you're in front of the judge, what are you going to do?
That's true.
You're going to plea, and you're not going to say, look, I've been trafficked, I'm under duress, can you help me? They just don't. They're scared.
Right.
And they're still coming off whatever drug they're still on.
Which again can
And they're
cause
waiting, and that guy back there is the guy who's got your fix.
Yeah.
And he's going to bail you out and give it to you and put you back to work. And
Thanks for keeping my butt clean. Have a great day. Here you go.
here's your present and get back to work. And so I think the reality of it is that duress element is very, very hard. Now, under normal circumstances, yes, if that person came up as a defense attorney, you can make that argument. Look, my client's been under duress. They've been trafficked. They wouldn't have done this. This guy in the back is the guy you need, and they would turn on him and say, that's the guy, and go get him. But that's not what happens, and we know that. And so what we're trying to do is piggyback off the work that Rob Portman's been doing at the federal level. My office obviously talks to his, want to find out how we can work together in this regard. So he's been wonderful to work with, and so has his staff. And this is just a piece of the pie. I mean, he's going after the root sources because he can as a U.S. Senator.
Correct.
And he can attack it from a national level, which is what we need. We need someone like that championing this issue. But at the state level, once these folks use that process that he's creating for us at the federal level, we've got to give them an opportunity to have a life so they get a paycheck and be back a part of our society in a normal way. And it's only through work and through the lack of shame of coming out of that can you rebuild. And so we want to help these little boys and these women rebuild. And HB 56 is kind of our best effort to try to do that.
You made mention that someone who has gone through everything they need to, followed the letter of the law, so to speak, to get themselves to where they are. They're ready to make that commitment, and I'm ready to get that job. They're declined because of their past. As you said, 15 years ago, that's something a door they don't ever want to open again. Is it almost as if, as of right now, because of this, we're opening those wounds again? Not to say that they're going to fall off the wagon, but there's that possibility.
Sure, and a lot of the data suggests that without the ability to get meaningful, gainful employment, they can fall victim very easily to that. I mean, one of the problems with this too is that you're dovetailing the abuse and the trauma of being a victim, but you've got an addiction component too.
That's true.
So these folks, the more research we have, the more we're looking at it. The reality of it is that unless you hold on to somebody for more than 2 years and you monitor for more than 2 years, it's almost 90% of them are going to use again. It is what it is. And so if you're not giving someone some hope and giving them an opportunity to do something other than sit on the couch and realize that, well, maybe all I am is this, maybe all I can do is this, and it just spirals,
yes.
and then it gives them an unfortunate path mentally to go back to a place where they think that that's all they are as a human being, that's all they're worth. And there's no human being on the planet that's a piece of meat. They're not. Our value is immeasurable. Our Creator made us for a purpose and a reason. It is not for that.
This is very true. Now, of course, we're trying to help the victim here, which is great. Are we also, in the state, also working to try to get rid of the pimp, the man behind the curtain? There is that component that, yes, we need to help those that are able to get out of that system, but what happens to those who are still trapped in it? Obviously, there is the ringleader stayed around.
And we do have laws on the books. They're there. I haven't heard from the Prosecutors Association that they don't believe that they're strong enough. I haven't heard from the judges that they said that they don't have enough tools to deal with that side of it. I think the reality of it is getting people to point their finger at the guy and say, he's the guy or she's the person, and point their way to it.
And I don't think we've ever found that magical means to be able to tell people, it's okay, and then the sky opens, the light comes down, and everything's right. It's hard for people, you're right, because they don't know what that next step is. Because if they were to say the wrong thing, and they're walking out, you never know if they're going to get knifed, killed, what have you.
You don't. I think the reality of it is, and early this morning we had a press conference, Bridget Kelly and I are naming a part of I-71 for Sonny Kim. Mm-hmm. And so we had a press conference this morning, we were talking about the calling that it is to be a police officer, and that the uniqueness of that calling. That when you walk out of your front door every day, you don't know if you're going to come home and see your spouse again or your kids. You walk out knowing that you may never see them again, and your spouse knows that when you walk out the front door you may never see that person again in your children. And in Sonny and Kim's case, that was the case. And I live on top of the hill, and I was only maybe a quarter mile, a couple football field lengths away from where that gunfight occurred the night before and the morning of. And so I heard it from when I was sitting out on the patio in the evening, watching the sunset. I heard the rustling down there, and in the morning when I was having my coffee, I heard it again. And the reality of it is we try as legislators to fix all kinds of human weakness,
Sure.
and the reality of it is it's impossible. What we can do is provide a construct and a framework for people to get through life. We can't fix it all. We can't legislate every fact pattern, and quite frankly, I don't think we should be doing that. I think we need to give prosecutors and judges tools so that they can deal with the individuals that come into their courtroom and give them the best opportunity they can to improve their life. And the ones that don't want to and want to live in that space, then that's a decision they've also made. But to give them the opportunity to make that choice when they're there, I think is what our responsibility is as a legislator. Give them a path. If you want to make your life better, if you want to improve it, well, why are we standing in your way, right?
Right.
Again, it's helping those that want to help themselves by providing the path for that. There's always going to be people, and we all have them in our own families even, right?
Agreed.
There's certain people who are like, man, why didn't my cousin study? I mean, he's got the ability to do it, and he won't, and he's going to
just
sit
sits there and does nothing,
Right, he does
yeah.
nothing. I want to. And we all have that in our families. We have friends that are like that. You can't change that. The only thing that can change is what's inside of a person. They can change themselves, but we can't change human behavior. It's impossible. So we have to do a lot of sticks and a lot of carrots, right,
Yeah.
to encourage people to find the right path for themselves. And I think that's what this bill is giving the right carrots and the right sticks in the right places to help people who really have been victimized to get out, and also to empower judges and prosecutors to find the ones that should get out and give them a chance. Because right now they're up against it and they don't have that opportunity. So I'm hopeful that we'll get some sort of resolution here this fall, and whether it's the House bill or the Senate bill that passes, I could care less. It doesn't matter.
As long as a bill that has,
as long as it gets done, and that's really been the focus.
as you pretty much summarized exactly what I've been told, change comes within, or as my father adds to it, it's also in your back pocket. So, but change is always available, and the fact that we're not necessarily giving a black and white diagram, that there is always going to be some gray area to it.
Right.
And being able to give a tool to someone to better themselves who want to do it,
Exactly
as you
right.
said, that's the only way we can make progress here in the state.
Exactly right.
You are watching the Columbus Report here on Waycross Community Media. I'm Jason Grisgoric. I'm joined with Representative Jonathan Deaver, discussing some pretty heavy issues here facing our state. We hear it every night. We hear it pretty much on any news platform we see, the opioid and heroin addiction that is going on still within our country as well as in our state itself. What is the legislation doing to further combat this issue that is plaguing us continually?
Sure. So we recently did our biennial budget.
Yes.
So it is now law, and within that there is a large appropriation, really focusing at the heart of the treatment component of this epidemic. I mean, one of the things that we've done in the last General Assembly, as you recall, with the effort of myself and Lou Terhar, who's now the senator here, Bill Seitz was the senator at the time. We really focused on putting some money into the facilities, so actually putting beds in the county. And we were able to get the facility down there at the Cat House fully funded. So Cat House now has doubled their capacity. They've got a new wing. It's opened. We cut the ribbon a couple months back. So we've provided the big missing component, which is, I think, the treatment beds to deal with the influx. I think the second piece, what the HOPES initiative is attempting to do, is there's an appropriation and a committee traveling at this point. And in my view, we have to focus on the individual. And so far we've been focusing on the entity providing the service, right? Whether it's the jailhouse, whether it's Cat House, whether it's Talbert, whether it's the courthouse, whatever it is, we have always focused on the agency or the entity providing whatever service it is they're providing. To me, that's backwards, because it's not about them, it's about the person, and everybody's different, right? There's an old saying we learned when we were kids: no two snowflakes are alike, no two snowflakes are the same. So albeit we have a lot of similarities, we're all completely fundamentally different. We have different likes, dislikes, we all look different, we all react differently to chemicals, we all react differently to medicine and to the treatments that go with it. So
It just goes with what we were saying. Nothing is in black and white. It is
That's right.
a little bit of gray.
That's right. So if we focus on the case, which means the individual, and we let the services then fill in the gaps for the individual who needs the services, When that happens, we're seeing a higher rate of success. We also know that if you keep with them for at least 2 years, which I mentioned earlier,
Right.
you increase the odds of success. So I think part of the HOPES initiative and the spend that was in the budget was to try to provide the resources to push towards that direction instead of every single entity having to be a one-stop shop, right?
Fair.
Cat House is really good at detoxing you and giving you the skills that you need. Talbot House has they're not the detox center, but they have the rest of the treatment components. You have Joe Trippy down there at mental health. He can help you with the mental health pieces, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So tying in the mental health component, tying in the addiction services and the treatment piece, but then also tying in the courthouse, the jailhouse, and allowing the thing to revolve around a case management approach rather than an agency is the key, I think, for that part. Now, one of the things that I think we also have to be honest about that nobody really wants to deal with because there's an old saying, can't arrest your way out of this problem. And in last term, we dealt with some of this stuff. We talked about it where heroin was treated like marijuana, right? Marijuana
Yes.
I've never seen anybody overdose on marijuana before unless it was laced with something that
I was
could
going to
kill
say,
you.
it's usually something else a part of it.
That's correct. And so what we've done now is we've treated the heroin the same as cocaine and crack cocaine for possession amounts to be classified as a major drug offender, which I think goes towards that premise. So until we're going to have a comprehensive federal drug policy conversation again, which I don't think is on the agenda in the near future for our federal partners, we have to also look at the fact that we have a county where people think it's okay to run semi-fulls of this junk through our communities. And we have to start cracking down on that too and allowing law enforcement to do that. And there's this tendency right now that says we can't arrest our way out. Well, the problem is if we're not dealing with the supply, it's hard enough to catch up with the amount of folks who are addicted. We don't have enough resources right now to deal with them. We're doing our best as a state to provide the local resources for our community. But at the same token, we've got to find a nice sweet balance between treatment and enforcement and getting as much of it off the street as we can.
Right.
The drug dealers are always going to find something else. And so we have to be proactive. The reality of it is last time we saw this in the inner cities, with the crack cocaine epidemic, it took us 20 years to kind of roll through it, meaning the education of our kids and cracking down on the dealers and providing the treatment. So it's the same kind of formula, but this time let's do it differently and focus on the person on the treatment side, get them out if we can, while we're starting to deal with the other pieces. So I think you're going to see a shift after this last budget. Towards more help and more support for addiction and mental health services. There's a lot of funding in there. I think we put just on the heroin piece alone about $170-some million. So we've done a major investment in there on top of what was already there. So that's in addition to the original spend. So I think we've got a decent path to start chipping away at this. But this is a partnership between our local law enforcement, the cops on the street, our police and fire, our EMS, our county commission, our local elected officials, our state elected officials, our state reps, our senators. We all have to be working together across party lines because I'll tell you what, heroin doesn't care whether you're a Republican or Democrat. It's irrelevant. It doesn't care whether you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter whether you're at an Indian Hill High School, School for Creative Performing Arts, Winton Woods High School.
However it gets to
you. It doesn't matter. It is coming at you, and our kids are exposed to more stuff than you and I could ever imagine when we were their age.
It is extremely scary. And, I was thinking as you were talking about this, we were talking about each individual place wanted to be a one-stop shop. Do you think we were at that point because we were so caught in we need to work more with less, therefore any entity needs to do that as well? Do you think most people got caught up in that, and that's where we kind of faltered?
Well, I think what happened, it was kind of like the local government approach, and this is my argument that I have with my colleague in the governor's mansion. It's that, in Hamilton County for a long time, in Ohio for a long time, we had more than enough. So you had enough resources, you could do pretty much whatever you wanted, you could expand it as much as you wanted, and then we went through this contractionary period for 16 years, the last 16 years, where our economy got hit hard because of 9/11, and then it followed up with what I would argue bad fiscal policy that is not the fault of, I know we like to point fingers at each other as R's and D's, but let's face it, it was 30 years of bad economic policy and housing that led to this. And it was bipartisan in leading up to it, and it was bipartisan in creating the fix, which in some ways made it worse. A lot of community banks that were providing lifeblood for this community we're sitting in right now that are gone because of the overreach of the fix, right? And so I think that's part of the problem is that we tend to swing too far one way or the other when we're trying to address a problem. And so I think the hope is let's get this thing back to the middle where it makes sense and we can find a path for everybody.
Well, let's hope we can find that. I mean, because we don't want to go back, as you said, 20 years ago. And if you're thinking about 20 years ago, yeah, we were just talking about heroin, and it was, that rock star who passed away from a drug overdose, and you kind of snuffed it off. That's what they do. That's not what.
Right.
But no, then when you start reading about, well, the track star who did this, or the father who did that, and it just compounds and puts a face, not just a celebrity face, it puts the everyday face to it,
right,
which makes, I think, it even more difficult than what we dealt with 20 years ago. And hopefully it's not going to be something that we have to deal with for another 20 to find a resolution.
And the sad part is pretty much everybody that I know now knows either someone in their immediate family or a friend's family that's been affected by some version of this.
Who would have ever thought that, though?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
everybody would be like, well, the drug of choice, now you don't know what it is, and you literally don't know what chemical compound it is.
That's the scary
And that's
part.
the scary part on
That's the
this.
scary
I think it goes with going with the idea of being arrested just to try to solve the problem here. Great that they wanted to find treatment, but we have a lot of treatment points out there. Why not utilize what we have? So I think it was causing a lot of that strain to be where we are today.
Yeah. And I think the economic downturn has also helped us share services, reduce,
Yes.
the bloat, and reprioritize. I mean, I've made this argument with you for the last 5 years that we've been talking. And number one, Hamilton County, we went from 300 million to 200 million. My school systems here have held flat in their spending for the course of 2 presidents. And the state of Ohio can't do it for whatever reason, and then they come to us and want us to pay more.
Yeah.
And I've thrown my hands up in the air and screamed and yelled as loud as I can in the hallways of the State House and saying, this has got to stop. We are finding ways to do more with less because we're being smarter. We're using private sector concepts like analytics and data to, God forbid, use real data.
No.
Instead of concepts, but what's really going on, and let's spend our money on what's happening instead of on what we think's happening, and spending the time to actually agree on what's happening because it's fact based. And the wonderful thing about that is once that happens, Republicans and Democrats, it's easy. You can sit down and you can get it done. The arguments that we always have is what we think is causing it. But with data today, you can find out actually what is really happening, and then politics are gone. Then you're faced with the reality of what it is, and you have to fix it.
And that's a very interesting way to look at that, because now we're starting to sit at a table, discuss the issue, and actually come up with a resolution, as opposed to, well, this is what I thought about it, and they thought the other thing, and
Right.
you walk off. There's a divide again.
Correct.
Until you can come back maybe 2, 3, 4 years
Right.
later, because that
Right.
person was not reelected, or somebody new is coming in, or it becomes a whole new issue.
Well, but I think we're fortunate in Hamilton County because of the fact that we had to tighten our strings. What it's forced us to do is the county and the city of Cincinnati and the suburbs out here and all of our municipalities, our townships, we all had to come together and work through the realities of economics. And it's saved our taxpayers tremendous amounts of money. It's made us leaner, more efficient, more effective. And it's not just, Forest Park or Springfield Township or Sycamore Township or Deer Park or, Madeira, Montgomery, Blue Ash, the places I represent, but it transcends the entire county. So
Sure.
we are seeing good government at the local level because of that reality. And so I think when it comes to the heroin component, it's also then pushed people to saying, you know what, the same thing should apply here because you know what, Talbot House, you're excellent at this. Cat House, you're excellent at that. Sheriff's Office, you're excellent at this. You're excellent at this. Trippy with mental health, you are great at this. Let's use you and let's put everybody together around a table and let's find a way to leverage each other's expertise and focus on the person and not on having control over the whole thing.
Right.
And so no matter where the referral source comes from, everybody gets to be used as a cog in helping that person be the best that they can be and give them the highest chance of success. I think that's what's coming out of Hamilton County. And in my view, it's one of the reasons why we're a leader on the conversation statewide on how to deal with this issue.
Well,
Now, it's just an issue of resources, which now we have. So
Sure.
now we're going to have to do some work together because we have resources. So hopefully we don't backslide and we just keep pushing forward now that we have the resources to supplement what we've learned in the last 20 years.
Considering, like we said, we at Hamilton County has spearheaded the Heroin Coalition. We had many great movements and initiatives to start that the state actually is like, well, yeah, Dayton can use this, Toledo could use this, Columbus
Right.
should use it, those things. And it's normally, it used to be, well, Columbus had that idea first. It's not that way anymore. So now being able to, everyone to come to the table, actually,
Again, we can be leaders in public policy.
See?
There you go.
things to
circle.
learn here. Let's lighten up
Sure.
the items here. We already touched a little bit of the ABLE Act and only by name, but this is something that we've, as we were saying a little bit before camera, that it's a little bit 300 and how many days?
22, I believe.
Yeah, we're almost at 365
We
here.
are, yeah.
And you have some, as we were talking, analytics and data.
Right.
You have brought some data
Right.
along.
So part of being the author of the ABLE Act for Ohio.
Yes.
So just to kind of refresh everybody's memory, the ABLE Act is a 529A account. So it works the same way as a college savings account for those that have people with disabilities and their family loved ones that have an eligible disability, allows them to save identical to the 529 for disability-related expenses. So if you have a loved one, you can put money in there, you get your tax offset. Now it's
Sure.
at $4,000, it was at $2,000, so we just raised
Okay.
that. So not only for your 529, but your 529A, it's at $4,000. But what's interesting is that we were the very first state in the country. It was one of my priorities when I came in my first term. And today, as of yesterday, or the day before yesterday, we are now at 3,885 accounts. We are the largest account holder. We have over $16.5 million in assets for individuals with disabilities inside the accounts. And we have several states who are participating in ours, Kentucky being one,
Okay.
Maine, Vermont. They are using our
Oh,
system, and we
okay.
privately label our platform and our services to those states, and we're expanding and growing. 54% of the folks that are in the program are Ohioans, and the balance are out of state. So that just kind of shows you that we are including a lot of other folks from across the country. I think we have disabled individuals from 49, I believe, of the 50 states that are participating in our program.
That's amazing.
It's wonderful. So this thing is growing, and more and more people are learning about it and taking advantage of the opportunities. We had somebody yesterday who's a Down syndrome lady. She's probably in her 50s at this point, and she was telling us how she was using her ABLE account, and she said, I was able to put a hardwood floor in my house. So she had clicked together hardwood
Sure.
floors, put in her house, and she was able to use her ABLE account for that. And before that, her floor was kind of falling apart. She was able to repair that. And before that, she was able to put a water heater in her home. And if it weren't for the ABLE account, she would not have been able to do that. So
Giving
things like
people
that
the
are
opportunity to
to
live
actually
life.
have a life. Correct. So, and if she would have had the money in her bank account, she would have lost her house.
Correct.
So by having it in the ABLE account and allowing her family to save for her, they are able to do things like fix her floor and put a new water heater in for her. So success story right out of the gate, but
Love it.
families are using this as a checking account, as a savings account too, for kids that are going to get older.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a lifeline for folks that have disabled loved ones. It's been great.
I was going to say, obviously, this is far exceeds your expectation. What was your minimum? What was your maximum? I'm not going to say minimum. What was your
Well,
maximum? In this?
I like to say that they say that 10% of the population has some form of a disability. Now the qualifying disability population is smaller than that. We have 100,000 folks, arguably, that would be eligible to participate right out of the gate for the ABLE account. But there's also some things that we have some locals here that are trying to do, is also do ABLE to work. So I'm constantly encouraging not only our congressional delegation, but our senators to pass the ABLE to work so that folks that have a qualifying disability go work, put their money directly deposit, so that they can accumulate some savings and take care of themselves. At the end of the day, it's perfect. You get people with disabilities back in the community, give them
Right.
purpose for life. They're great employees. They show up on time. They do their work. They're happy.
It's true.
And so why wouldn't you not want people to have some sort of productivity in their life if they so choose and are so able? So I'm really excited about it. I think it's, I think we're on track. Our goal, of course, is to be the number one and remain the number one provider for ABLE accounts for the country, and to grow this exponentially. We believe that ours is the best. The basis points on this is phenomenal. If you're an Ohioan, I mean, you can't get deals like this for investments. It's wonderful, and it's growing, and it's compounding. The service providers that are managing the funds, I mean, they're really doing this at a loss for our citizens. So it's a cool thing, and I'm happy that the results are what we anticipated.
I know we kind of went into this saying that it was going to be a dire day, but if you really think about it, it has really been a complete circle going from
Sure.
today was basically about enabling, making sure that people of Ohio are able to do what they believe is be it their hobby, their life, their livelihood.
Sure.
And we've been able to go through all of these wonderful things. This is wonderful. The ABLE Act is a wonderful thing, and I can't wait to, when we come back in 2018, when we have completely gone a 365, I'd love to reconnect and see those numbers as well.
Absolutely. That'd be great.
Those would be great. As always, towards the end of the program, I always open it up to anything that you might be working on that is just in that brewing stage. Since we're close to October, we can say something to that effect.
Well, that's true. Well, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I always have a lot of things brewing. But let me give you a couple that I think
Sure.
stay with the same theme, because there's always the structural repairs. Chairman Butler always says, "Oh, it's another boring Deaver bill," because it's always a structural thing. And typically, people don't oppose my legislation because I try to work diligently and get everybody to agree on the role of the bill, what it's trying to do, and reducing the burden on individuals. It's always been my goal is get Ohio out of your way, and create an environment that's self-policing. So you're doing the right thing because it's in your best interest, and then it's in the best interest of the state and the local government, and everybody wins, right? So a couple of things that we're working on internally. One is a Student Bill of Rights.
Okay.
So one of the problems that's out there right now, and I'm sure many of your viewers, you and I both, have student loans.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of problems with that when it comes to notice and disclosure. A lot of parents and grandparents sign as co-signers on student loans, not understanding the ramifications of that, not understanding that if their son or grandson died, that they're still on the hook for it and they have to pay it, that it's not dischargeable in bankruptcy for any of the people who signed the document, and also that the parent and the grandparent don't have to sign it. That's another thing that people don't know. You don't have to sign for your kids' student loans.
Interesting.
So creating a Bill of Rights for students that have to be disclosed up front so people know what they're getting themselves into, that the guarantors and the parents and the grandparents that think they have to co-sign, whether they're being told that or not is irrelevant. It's more of a matter of educating and informing them.
Sure.
And then also working with the Attorney General's office to kind of streamline the collection process and reduce the cost of that. So most of the time, when it gets to that level, the amount that you owe almost doubles because of all the fees and costs that get imputed. And I've always said, how can an attorney general bill by the hour when they're salaried? Right? We're paying their salary,
That's
so
true.
how are you billing by the hour? So I think there's a component to that I think needs to be addressed to help folks that have student loans or are getting into them understand what they're really doing. I don't think people get that. They tend to use their student loans to buy a car or pay for an apartment. And
I unfortunately saw many friends who did that, and I just was like, really?
It's better to get a car loan
Okay.
because at least it can go away.
Yes.
These things follow you for your life. So I think doing something like that is helpful. So we're still working on the meat and potatoes of the legislation, but the concept's out there, and we're working that bill. Another one that I think will end up being long-term important to the state of Ohio, we're working on the rest of the financial services reform. So as you recall, the other stack of promises I made is that I'm going to take that entire financial institutions piece, I'm going to rewrite it. And the reason why is that after the year of too big to fail, I had too many I told you so moments for my clients as I was representing folks, and a lot of people right around here where we are today. I've represented a lot of homeowners and business owners that were losing their businesses and their homes to foreclosure, or they were losing their business in the commercial space over here to non-payment of rent because bad things happen sometimes. And my job is always to try to make the best out of a bad situation. So I found that the rules and the way the law was written was unfair, it was unbalanced. And so I'm trying to rewrite it and reorganize it so that everybody knows what their rights are and everybody knows where they stand. This isn't weighted one side or another, but I want to equal the playing field so that as a consumer or as a lender, you have a clear understanding of where you are and what you're supposed to be doing. But more importantly, I want to make sure that all of our folks that have licenses to lend know where they're supposed to be and know what license they're supposed to get, which, believe it or not, is confusing in Ohio. And the Department of Financial Institutions spends over 50% of their day trying to figure that out. When someone wants to provide a loan, they have to they spend most of their day figuring out what license you should have.
Wow.
So cleaning that up,
So
cuts
there really
costs,
is
make things more efficient.
Again, going with the black and white. There's no black and white there.
There really isn't. It's a giant gray zone. And I think why is because over time people, well, I'm going to make an adjustment to the statute here, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and it gets to the point where you can't read it and understand it. So we need to shrink it and put everybody in their own lane and make it simpler. And as a net result of that, since Dodd-Frank happened, a lot of our community banks in the state have shut down. Nationally, it's almost 6,000 banks have shut down. These are our small banks that tend to be in the rural areas and our inner cities. So if you're in the city of Cincinnati or you're here in Forest Park, you remember that we had a lot more banks around here.
It's true.
About 10 years, 5 to 10 years ago, we had a lot more banks around here, and they're all gone. And that's why. It's because the regulatory burden that was placed on them got to the point where they couldn't exist. And so what we're trying to do also is provide some relief to the extent that we can at the state level. So if you're in a poor area, whether it's in Appalachia, the country, a small county, inner city, you're going to have access to capital, so you can help borrow money for your business that you want to put in the mall. You can borrow money for your small business if you're a trade guy or you're a concrete finisher, whatever you are. Having access to capital is imperative for you to have the ability to grow and expand your business. So fixing that is a structural thing. It's going to be really, really hard to do.
Well, because to me, as I'm listening to it, it sounds like you're trying to rebuild trust.
Yes, sir.
And that's something that's extremely difficult to do.
And the way I'm going to do this is I like to say carrot, 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 big stick, carrot. So instead of stick, 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 small carrot, right? So I want to encourage banks to do the right thing, encourage them to self-squeal, basically a second chance rule. So if they make a mistake, fix it. Wouldn't you rather have the bank call you and say, hey, by the way, we found a mistake we made, we fixed it and recredited your account, I apologize. And you're like, oh, great, thank you.
Okay.
And you hang up and now you're really happy. Versus, wait a minute, I found a mistake, and then they fight you and argue with you.
We could never make that mistake.
Correct.
We're the bank.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And then it creates an environment that's not conducive to trust and faith.
Correct.
So creating that environment and rebuilding that trust, I think, is imperative. We've got to have that again, especially for small businesses. And the last thing you want to do is go to an international or national bank to borrow money. They don't care about you.
No.
Your local bank does, because you probably live next door to the president of the bank.
Well, I was just going to say, it all goes back to being interconnected, bringing that local feel back home.
That's right.
And you'll want to trust them to do banking issues, or you don't feel wrong to go to somebody else, but you want to go to someone you know.
That's right. And then the last thing, because I've got so many more, but I think this one's really important, just because it's personal. The Nation of Israel recently has changed the way they view people with disabilities when it comes to service. As you know, in their nation, every single Israeli has to sign up and serve at 18, and they have to do 2 years. And the problem is that if you had a disability, you were ineligible for service. The Nation of Israel has done something which I find absolutely heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. And they said, look, it doesn't matter what kind of disability you have, we're going to let you serve in whatever capacity you can serve in.
Okay.
And so I am drafting right now a resolution that I'm going to send to Congressman Stivers, who is now the commander of our National Guard. And I've called him and talked to him about it, and he likes the idea, and he's going to work with me on this. Now I'm going to try to get it done in Ohio, and he's going to work on it in Congress. And what I'm asking Congress to do, and our Secretary of Defense and our President to do, is follow that same path and follow that same lead. If you have a disability and you want to serve, then we should find a way for you to serve. Right here in Blue Ash, we have people who operate drones. The last thing I looked at, if you can move your hands and you can think, you can be wheelchair bound and serve our country. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. That's right. And so this resolution will be a request that our Secretary of Defense, our President, and our Congress do something to change that and follow the Nation of Israel's lead and allow those who want to serve the ability to do so. Anybody who wants to serve, even if you can't be in combat and you can't bench press 300 pounds and you can't parachute, does not mean that you can't provide some service to our nation. And so I'm going to follow their lead, and I'm grateful that the Nation of Israel has realized that people with disabilities have value and that they can serve, and so we're going to do the same thing in Ohio.
It is a very beautiful means to let everyone be a part and be a true citizen of the United States, as well as a true citizen of Ohio. If they want to, I don't know how many times I drive by the National Guard post by my house, and you see it full when I go, oh, well, they're playing Army. But then to think about, well, not everybody gets that opportunity.
That's right.
And I don't think that's something everybody thinks about. We hear, especially in the climate that we're in right now, that we need to bolster our armies, we need to bolster our armed forces. But yet, at the same time, we're still telling people you can't do it.
Right.
Again, you said this is a personal issue. How soon or how do you think this is a fast track item? You think we'll see?
I hope so. I mean,
it really is a tug at the heartstrings kind of thing. But it's the idea that yes, there are people who still can serve. This can happen.
Well, and the funny thing is, I also look at it this way too. That if you've got a bad ankle, you can't serve, right? If you have flat feet, you can't
Yeah.
serve. If you have bad eyes, you can't serve. But that doesn't mean that you can't, right?
Right.
And so if you have a disability and you really truly want to serve, the only thing that's preventing you from doing so is an arcane law that says every single soldier has to be able to carry a rifle and go on the front line.
Yeah.
And we know right now for a fact that if you're in the Air Force, 1 in 16 members never see the front line, they're in support. And the numbers are they're not the same, but in the Marines, the Air Force, the National Guard, Coast Guard, Army, etc., there are folks that are sitting at a desk and they're there because their brains have skills.
Right.
Now, they might have been 18 and they passed it and they got injured, but we have soldiers that got injured and lost their legs that are still in and providing services. So there is a place for people with disabilities that have skills to serve our country, and we shouldn't just say because you have a disability you're not allowed to wear a uniform. And so my view is I have great admiration for the Prime Minister of Israel, who led that charge, who made that a change in policy for their nation, and there's no reason whatsoever why we shouldn't do the same.
Agreed. I can't wait to hear any more of this. So we will definitely be back sooner rather than later. Promise this time.
Sounds good.
Excellent. So, Representative Deaver,
Thank you so much.
thank you for joining. And of course, thank you for joining us as well. You have been watching this month's episode of the Columbus Report, your inside track to those in the know in the State House. I'd like to thank you for the evening, and we'll talk to you next time.